They say the city of Arden was built not just from stone and steel, but from something rarer, belief. Belief that even in a galaxy filled with species more advanced, more ancient, more numerous, humans could not just survive, but thrive. It stood on the edge of human space like a promise and a warning, a gleaming spire in defiance of the void. The city had no shields orbiting it, no planetary cannons or fleets hovering in defense. What it had was humanity, and for a long time that was enough. But the galaxy had changed. From beyond the rim, the Zarn came. They were not the first to challenge humanity, but they were different. A war machine masquerading as an empire. They didn't conquer for need. They conquered because nothing else could stop them. Worlds fell in hours. Civilizations erased in days. Not by overwhelming firepower alone, but by crushing the will of their enemies before the first shot landed. They believed resistance was irrational. Arden was next. They sent a single vessel first. Not a ship of war. No, a scout, sleek and surgical. It hovered above the spires of Arden, mapping, analyzing, calculating. No threats detected. No fleets incoming. The city, they concluded, would collapse within minutes of a proper assault. Humans, after all, always broke. Eventually. But beneath the surface, behind every window, inside every breath, there was motion. Quiet at first, coordinated, unyielding, because Arden wasn't just a city. It was a testament, and its people knew what was coming. Council members didn't argue. They planned. Engineers didn't debate possibilities. They built. Students didn't flee. They learned. No one asked who would save them. They already knew the answer, and it wasn't someone else. The data sent back by the Zarn Scout was clear. Arden's defenses were outdated, its weapon systems limited, its people, they assumed, unprepared for war. The Zarn laughed. One general commented that humans were persistent like mold, annoying but soft. Another noted they'd seen 1,000 cities like Arden crumble in fire. They had numbers. They had drones. They had algorithms. What they didn't have was Arden's soul. The first alert came in the form of static. Then gravity shimmered across the sky as the Zarn fleet arrived, not with elegance, not with strategy, but with certainty. Their command ships blotted out the sun. Not a declaration of war, just a statement. You're ours now. The citizens watched from rooftops. No one screamed. No one ran. They simply stood, not passive, present. That was the first fracture in the Zarn's plan. There was no chaos to exploit, no panic to manipulate, just resolve. Inside the city, in bunkers and labs, old tech was pulled from dusty shelves. Prototypes that once failed in tests were re-examined. Drones from 3 wars ago were stripped for parts. People built, fast, crude, effective. Arden didn't have the luxury of perfection. It had purpose. They didn't design weapons. They assembled answers. A small team of engineers, all under 30, reworked a failed mining tool into what would later be called a pulse hammer. It didn't look impressive. It didn't need to. It could shatter Zarn armor in a single hit. They produced only a dozen that first night. That was enough. The question wasn't how many weapons they had. It was how well they'd use them. In one of the city's domed forums, a former poet read a speech, not to the world, but to a handful of militia recruits. She didn't speak of victory. She didn't speak of fate. She spoke of choice. They think the city is just walls and lights. But we are the city. We are the fight. When they strike, remember, they chose the wrong people. The Zarn knew war, but they didn't know humans. Not like this. The Council activated long-forgotten protocols. Communications were rerouted through civilian net hubs. Power grids rebalanced to run at 120% efficiency. Every streetlight became a beacon. Every display screen a coordination node. Arden became a living, thinking organism. A city with a mind and a mission. As the fleet aligned above, preparing its first descent pods, a transmission was sent. From Earth? No. From Arden. 5 words. No theatrics. No threats. We are not for taking. The message echoed through every Zarn ship. Some dismissed it. Others hesitated. Not for fear, but confusion. This wasn't defiance, they understood. This wasn't strategic bluffing. This was the line. And humans, when pushed to that line, did not retreat. On the upper levels of the skywalks, a retired orbital pilot instructed teenagers on drone evasion tactics. In subways, old soldiers turned train maps into battle plans. In homes, children learned to pack medkits. There were no spectators left in Arden, only defenders. A lone man climbed the outer wall of the city with a pulse hammer strapped to his back. He wasn't special, not a hero, not in command, but he was one of them, one among many. He looked at the black sky, to the growing swarm of descent pods. He smiled. This wasn't surrender. This wasn't desperation. This was the first breath before the storm. And the Zarn, for all their power, had no idea what they had just started. The first strike wasn't a missile. It was a sound. Low, grinding, planetary, as if the sky itself groaned in protest. The descent pods came down like rain, metallic, precise, unstoppable. The Zarn didn't waste time with negotiations or intimidation. They were creatures of pattern. Drop, suppress, dominate, repeat. Arden absorbed the impact like a heartbeat absorbing tension. The outer sectors collapsed under the weight of coordinated shock troopers. Towers bent, streets split, fires rose in crimson arcs. The first wave was meant to shatter morale. It didn't. Inside the broken edges, humanity moved. Not like prey, but like a fluid force adapting to every pressure point. Civilians dragged wounded neighbors through crumbling tunnels. Medics didn't wait for orders. They improvised. Tourniquets from curtain cords. Burn treatments from kitchen stock. Every home became a triage center. The Zarn advanced with military perfection. Rows of drones marched with unwavering aim, supported by armor shells humming with shield resonance. Their scanners noted no organized human military presence. No central command structure. It made them confident. Too confident. In the ruins of Sector 7, 3 teenagers with a repurposed welding drone lured patrol unit under a collapsed monorail, then detonated a fusion cell. One of them lost an arm. None of them retreated. At the University Quadrant, scientists repurposed old terraforming nanites into mobile fog fields. The Zarn, unfamiliar with chemical chaos, staggered blindly to their own coordinated kill zones. It was the first time in their campaign they logged a systemic delay due to unpredictable environmental interference. They didn't understand that was the point. Humans didn't need superiority. They needed opportunity. And every crater, every broken street, every dead circuit was an opportunity waiting to be weaponized. The Zarn generals watched through cold observation feeds. Their metrics were confusing. Human resistance wasn't consolidating. It was dispersing, multiplying. Pockets of conflict bloomed in places that had no tactical value. They began recalibrating. They assumed humans were reacting emotionally. They were wrong. Arden wasn't responding. It was adapting. From a forgotten basement in the South Corridor, an elderly mechanic activated an analog broadcast tower. No digital signals. No encryption. Just raw. Open band communication bouncing off the city's infrastructure. Instructions, targeting data, enemy positions, all transmitted in bursts. Old tech the Zarn couldn't trace, let alone jam. That was the beauty of being underestimated. Resistance leaders weren't officers. They were teachers, musicians, engineers, cooks. They organized by instinct, by trust, by necessity. There was no single plan. There were 1,000 overlapping ideas evolving with every heartbeat. It wasn't elegant. It was human. The pulse hammer struck for the first time in direct combat near the East Trench. 6 operators. 2 minutes of contact. For enemy walkers dismantled. 1 Zarn elite unit eradicated. The hammers overloaded, burned out, exploded. But the line held. Every success came with a price. The people of Arden paid it without hesitation. A single image spread among them. Captured by a civilian drone. A child carrying water through a firestorm, eyes locked forward. That image wasn't propaganda. It was proof. They weren't broken. The Zarn escalated. Drone strikes intensified. Biological gas clouds drifted through wind patterns. Nano-infestation weapons released. The city fought back with duct tape, copper wiring, and pure defiance. Old filtration systems, long considered obsolete, now kept entire blocks breathing. Children ran errands in insulated gear stitched from furniture covers. A young girl, no older than 12, delivered a rebuilt targeting lens across 8 kilometers of scorched road to a squad trying to repair an anti-air cannon. She collapsed afterward. The cannon fired. The Zarn were relentless, efficient, bound by protocols refined across centuries. But that was their flaw. They had rules. Arden had none left. A makeshift command node formed inside a hollowed-out museum. No artifacts remained, but the walls still held echoes of history. The commander, an ex-librarian with battlefield promotions earned not by rank, but by sheer stubborn logic, directed multi-sector coordination, using laminated paper maps and string. Zarn analysts couldn't model what was happening. Their simulations failed. Their timelines disintegrated. For the first time in the campaign, a senior strategist filed a cautionary alert to high command. This human population displays statistically abnormal resistance. Consider containment over eradication. It was ignored. In a collapsed tunnel beneath the old train lines, 5 civilians held off an entire Zarn platoon with modified mining charges and false echo emitters. The tunnel collapsed again. No one made it out. The Zarn didn't advance either. On the 3rd night, the governor's voice returned, not through a central channel. It came in fragments, stitched through public terminals and emergency radios. This isn't about victory. It's about memory. Every moment we hold, we become something greater. Not just survivors, not just humans. We become ardent. No anthem followed. No applause. Just silence. Then movement. Everyone knew what had to be done. The Zarn dropped heavier units, battle carapace elites, organic intelligence nodes. Arden's answer was simple. Make the city impossible to predict. Pavement was melted into traps. Elevators turned vertical death spirals. Building facades collapsed into portable barricades. A teenager hacked a maintenance bot to carry incendiary charges directly into an armored personnel unit. A nurse used expired sedatives to tranquilize an advancing shock trooper. An elderly violinist jammed sonic frequencies that disrupted drone coordination for 37 seconds, long enough for a squad to escape. The Zarn were warriors. Arden made them afraid. For the first time in recorded history, a Zarn assault vector paused mid-operation, not from failure, from uncertainty. And humans live in uncertainty. They thrive in it, because where others see instability, humans see invention. Where others obey command trees, humans trust instinct. Where others follow doctrine, humans follow grit. Arden didn't repel the invasion that night, but it did something far more dangerous. It made the enemy doubt. And for the first time, the Zarn realized something terrifying. The city wasn't crumbling. It was learning. On the 4th day, the Zarn altered their strategy. No more brute force incursions. No more assumptions about a quick surrender. They introduced Phase Protocol Theta, a planetary psychological collapse program, refined across dozens of conquests. It started with silence. Communications between human sectors were severed using interference drones. No explosions, no lasers, just isolation. In most species, isolation fractures unity. But humans evolved in small bands, under stars that never promised safety. When cut off, they didn't scatter. They adapted. Neighborhoods became tribes. Streets turned into communes. Each block a micro-resistance with its own leaders, its own tactics, its own spirit. The Zarn launched holographic infiltrators, synthetic humans designed to mimic despair. They moved through rubble, whispering that surrender meant survival, that Arden was lost, that hope was a lie. It failed. An old woman in Sector 9 exposed one of them by asking what her husband's favorite color was. When the infiltrator paused, she drove a kitchen blade through his projection node. The recording was uploaded and shared across 1,000 human terminals, an elderly citizen silencing alien deception with homemade conviction. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with action. People didn't wait for orders. They created them. Power cells were rerouted. Gravity vents used to trap descending drones. Libraries turned into tactical archives. Even the graffiti on ruined walls began forming coded messages, drop points, resistance paths, warnings, and poetry. Art was no longer just resisting, it was creating. One boy designed a scanner from a music player and a burnout motion sensor. It didn't last long, but it saved 3 lives. A group of former sanitation workers developed a tunnel system beneath the smoldering city core. When the Tsarn discovered it, they lost 3 squads trying to navigate the chaos below. The Tsarn issued their first internal reclassification: Ardent City, Containment Priority, Psychological Unpredictability at 94%. Still, they didn't retreat. Instead, they brought in Overseer-class command units, organisms bred not just for war, but for manipulation. They projected surrender fields, pulses designed to suppress dopamine, induce fatigue, weaken human will. In previous wars, these signals triggered collapses within 30 hours. Ardent's people experienced the pulses. They grew tired, movement slowed, eyes dimmed, but they kept building, kept moving, kept fighting. They didn't resist the suppression field through strength. They did it through one another. A mechanic shared stories of old Earth legends to keep his team awake. A teacher turned lullabies into marching chants. A small orchestra played broken instruments in a subway station to drown out the pulse. The music was awful, but it was human. The Tsarn calculated energy losses, supply delays, increasing casualty rates. Their logic systems began recommending eradication protocols. Their command structures hesitated. No enemy had ever made them consider retreat. Pride became a liability. Their algorithms began to diverge. Humans, meanwhile, were aligning. From the depths of fire-gutted Medical Bay, a new message pulsed into the airwaves. Just 5 seconds of audio. A voice, gravel-rough and unmistakably human. Still here, still fighting, still human. That signal repeated every 20 minutes. The Tsarn tried to block it. The humans just rerouted it through dozens of analog circuits. It echoed in ruined apartments, in burned-out cars, across walls lined with ash. It wasn't a battle cry. It was a reminder. The city didn't need to win yet. It just needed to exist. The Tsarn's frustration became desperation. They unleashed their bio-reapers, 6-legged harvesting machines designed to consume biomass and leave nothing but sterilized soil, each one the size of a building. They landed near the food reserves, targeting Ardent's most critical resource, hope. Ardent didn't have tanks. It didn't have orbital weapons. It had people who refused to quit. 3 food couriers rigged their own delivery trucks into explosives and drove straight into the bio-reaper cluster. All 3 were lost. The Reapers were slowed, not stopped. Then came the children. Not to fight, to move. A network of young runners guided people through fire and toxin-filled streets, ferrying supplies and messages between districts the Tsarn believed cut off. They used sewers, wall cracks, emergency shafts. The youngest was 6, the oldest 17. Their code name, Lanterns. They didn't need orders, just purpose. In a buried lab beneath the cultural center, a blind scientist activated a device thought abandoned, a sonic destabilizer once deemed too dangerous to test. It functioned at short range, a last resort. She stood with one assistant and waited as the bio-reapers neared. The blast didn't just destroy the machines. It created a crater large enough to split the Tsarn ground line in half. The cost was immense. The effect was greater. The Tsarn officially declared Ardent a catastrophic variable. That was the turning point, because for the first time in the invasion, the city wasn't merely surviving. It was influencing. Other human colonies began intercepting Ardent's broadcasts. Small resistance cells in other systems sent encrypted acknowledgments. One simply said, "We see you." A single outpost on Mars beamed coordinates of a prototype drone AI, inspired by Ardent's tactics, coded by teenagers and veterans alike. It began self-learning and feeding intel back through deep space relays. Ardent adapted again. The Overseer units were pulled back. The drones began falling from the sky. Tsarn soldiers reported emotional interference, during missions. Some hesitated before pulling triggers. Some started questioning orders. They'd never encountered humans like this, because these weren't just humans. They were citizens of a city that wouldn't break, a city that remembered every sacrifice, that carried every scar like a flag. Arden didn't wait for a fleet to come save it. It didn't pray for reinforcements. It became its own salvation. And as dawn cracked through a burnt orange sky, one truth became clearer than ever before to the Zarn. They could still destroy the city, but they could never conquer it. The Zarn Council convened in silence. Across vast interstellar networks, neural pulses and data streams echoed one shared anomaly. Arden had not fallen. According to all prior models, Earth's defenses should have cracked in under 48 hours. Instead, 7 days had passed, and not a single district had surrendered. The Zarn did not comprehend stubbornness. It wasn't part of their culture. They assumed fear was a universal constant, that once hope was shattered, resistance would crumble. They had never met a city like Arden. They had never fought humans with nothing left to lose, and everything to prove. On the 8th night, Arden pushed back. It wasn't with tanks or ships. It was with clarity. An encrypted signal pulsed through a dozen jamming fields and reached the heart of the Zarn fleet. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea. It was a list. Names. Thousands of them. The fallen. The missing. The honored. Each name spoken once, in 100 voices, layered and real. A reminder. Every loss added strength. Every death meant something. This was not war for territory. It was war for memory. The Zarn didn't know how to answer that. In the city's fractured underground, something new had formed. Something not born from command, but from connection. Engineers from opposite ends of Arden collaborated through tapping code and light flashes. Farmers guided scavengers through collapsed grocery zones. Artists painted warning signals visible from orbit. And when the Zarn began deploying heat-based suffocation fields, the city responded not with countermeasures, but with timing. Every building had learned when to open and seal. Every tunnel adapted. It was as if Arden itself had grown a brain. But it wasn't artificial intelligence. It was collective instinct. One mind made of millions, bound by grief and grit. The pulse hammer operators, thought lost in earlier battles, returned. Scarred, wounded, half-starved, but still carrying the cores. They no longer fought to win. They fought so no one would ever forget how hard it was to try. The final offensive began when the Zarn landed their world ender, a war platform 5 kilometers wide, capable of collapsing tectonic lines. It hovered above Arden like a final sentence. Its voice was synthetic and cruel. The city will cease. The reply came not from a general, but a child's voice on a pirate signal. You first. The mines were detonated. Thousands of seismic charges, implanted by sewer workers, construction crews, and former janitors, activated in a precise ripple, not aimed at the enemy, aimed beneath the city itself. Arden dropped, 200 meters downward, into the hollowed chambers of its geological spine. Reinforced vaults shielded it from impact. Dust and rocks swallowed the skyline. The world ender fired its weapons and missed. The city had vanished. It was no longer a target. Now it was a trap. Inside the world ender, Zarn systems malfunctioned. Interference. Ghost signatures. Energy feedback loops no engineer could explain. One by one, their systems shut down, not from hacking, but from chaos they could not calculate. Arden rose again. Not physically, but symbolically. Its people surged upward through new tunnels and weaponized elevators. Makeshift railguns built from freight systems targeted the exposed underbelly of the platform. The first bolt struck true. The second ruptured containment. The third came from a salvaged satellite cannon. The humans repaired just enough for one final shot. The world ender didn't explode. It fell right into the crater where Arden had been. The city swallowed the enemy whole. Silence followed. Then cheering. Then mourning. Then silence again. Because Arden knew it wasn't over. The Zarn fleet remained in orbit. Their ships were functional. Their weapons untouched. They had numbers, power, precision. But they didn't descend. They didn't attack. They watched, and humanity watched back. From the ruins, a beacon rose. It wasn't bright. It wasn't beautiful. It was made of scrap metal and broken glass, but it pulsed with life. A signal broadcast not just in frequency, but in feeling. You cannot break what refuses to stop becoming. Other human settlements received it first, then dissident alien colonies, then scattered resistance cells from species long thought extinct. All across the galaxy, beings who had given up hope heard Arden's heartbeat. The Zarn had never encountered myth in real time, never watched the story carve itself into the present. They didn't know how to kill that. They still had power. But power means nothing against an idea. Arden was now more than coordinates. It was a concept. It meant, you can try, we will not yield. The Zarn left orbit on the 11th day. No formal retreat. No surrender. Just absence. Because some enemies you don't defeat in battle. Some enemies you survive until they fear trying again. In the aftermath, Arden wasn't rebuilt in the traditional sense. There were no straight lines. No centralized government. What rose from the crater was a city made of memory and motion. Houses designed by the people who lived in them. Roads shaped by the paths resistance fighters once took. The beacon remained at the center, pulsing once every hour, not for communication, but for remembrance. Children were taught not what the Zarn did, but what humans became in response. They weren't raised to hate. They were raised to endure. A phrase etched into the walls of the new city hall said it best. We are not unconquerable because of walls or weapons. We are unconquerable because we refuse to stop becoming. Arden was not perfect. It never would be, but it was free, not because it had no enemies, but because it had no quit. And in every corner of the universe where someone doubted the strength of humanity, the story spread. The city that could not be broken, the people who fought without rank, the voices that would not be silenced, the unconquerable city,